Welcome. We have a really full agenda today, and so I would love to get started. So Holly, would you go ahead and take roll?
Jamie Ackman,
Here.
Jeff Hill,
Here.
Amanda DeJesus,
Here.
and Mark Dolson.
Here.
Awesome. So the first item on the agenda is the outreach for the rate study. And we might want to catch you up a little bit because last night at the board meeting, we, I think, I was concerned that the rate study was coming back on the 16th for a vote to begin the Prop 218 process. And I really wanted us to have at least some time to try and host some kind of outreach. So we as a board decided to push that back to December 7th for that decision to give ourselves a little more time here. So with that as context, I would love to hear from you. Carly, did you want to introduce the item or?
Of course. Yeah, so as many are aware, we are going through a rate study presently. Miller and Maxfield, who's our consulting outreach firm, has been assisting Reptelis, the consultant completing the rate study. But it's really just been a support thus far. And as we move into the Prop 218 process, we would like Miller Maxfield to take on a more active role. So today they're going to propose what they believe will be the right strategy for the Prop 218 process. And thus far, just for some background, we have had 4 public presentations by Reptelis to the board of directors. And today we're likely to propose a few additional presentations and public meetings for the Prop 218. So I'll go ahead and let Jennifer and Bill take it away from there. And Scott, do you have their presentation? Awesome.
Thank you, Scott. So I'll just get on with this guy over here. Holly, will you let me know if there is anyone online that yeah, thank you.
So far there is not.
So to keep members of the public informed and engaged with the district, we have a comprehensive communications plan to execute in partnership with SLB staff and board members. This plan is a holistic approach to the rate increase and Prop 218 process. And you go to the next slide, please, Scott. So far, we've done some work to share rate study information in partnership with district staff. And that's included things like promoting the rate study via the email newsletter, social media, and the website, and then supporting the, this is more of a staff effort, but the special effort made to invite top 25 users, civic groups, and Bear Creek residents to participate in the process. So that's just a very quick overview of what has happened. I think really talking about what's coming is more important unless anyone has questions on this slide. Okay. And did you want to add anything?
Nope, I'm good.
Okay. Thank you, Scott. So, and apologize for the small font here. I can send this to you later if you'd like.
Just a moment.
Okay.
Yeah.
I got this.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I wasn't sure. Did you ask if I had any questions at this
I
point?
did, but I had a lot of coffee today, so I apologize. I'm moving
No,
a little
that's okay.
fast.
I did, but I didn't want to interrupt otherwise.
Yeah.
So I'd just be a little curious to know more about if you were able to gauge whether there was any response to any of these things you listed on that previous slide.
Yeah.
Um,
That's a great question. That we have seen a little bit of feedback on social media, and I can't speak to what the district staff is hearing at the office, but all of that has been positive. And comments like, give them whatever money they want, please support these infrastructure projects. We need all of this. So it's been just a couple of people, but they've been very supportive.
That's going to be the tagline for the campaign.
Give them whatever they want. That's what Bob was talking about last night, that he didn't believe Facebook.
So I would comment also that we have had several people show up at board meetings. They have not been as generous in their thinking.
Okay.
And then some of them are people that we know well, but yeah, it hasn't been quite as warmly received.
Yeah.
And particularly when we, reached out to have the public come and aggressively invited them.
Yeah.
They didn't show up in any significant numbers, maybe 10 people one time.
Well, again, I would say, we have been talking in very esoteric terms
Yes.
about rates
Oh,
at this
yes.
point, and you know, it is my experience, having been through many Prop 218 processes as staff, that when you talk about the structural framework of rates, everybody goes deaf. When you say, here's what your bill is gonna look like, all of
Yeah.
a sudden people are interested in talking to you. And I kind of want to emphasize that my view is, this isn't about getting positive feedback. It's about getting feedback. And sometimes you got to take your lumps as a district in order to show that you are listening, even if you can't give everyone what they want. So.
To
Yeah.
put that in more earthy terms, we're making sausage here, and so far we've been talking about making it and the ingredients. But most of the people out there are interested in what is it gonna taste like,
Right.
so.
And we know from our experience, we've been through several of these processes with you in the past now, that, you know, there will be a small, loud group. And then there's a very large, quiet group that supports or just doesn't really care either way. And you won't hear from them. So you're going to hear the worst things. But there's still a lot of quiet support out there as well.
Definitely. And before we start on the outreach strategies, the one thing that I would like to see us have a response to is this notion that one of our directors has, that the Prop 218 process is not democratic, because that's just ridiculous. It is not the kind of process where you elect a person, but it is absolutely the kind of process where you give people a voice in the decision. And the reason that it is a process where you ask people to say no rather than yes is that there are there's always going to be about 25% of any electorate that says no to any, you know, new tax, new rate, new fee, anything. And the point is to see if the outcry, demand, or rate that you're asking for rises above that 25%, which is why you ask for the no, not the yes. And I think that one of our directors really gets that wrong in the way that he characterizes that to the public.
That's helpful to know. Thank you.
Mhm.
So what we're going to talk about here, just to jump back in, is a holistic approach that includes basically all the tools in our toolkit. The first one, and thank you, I can't remember who sent me this morning, the new schedule.
I think Teresa did.
I think Teresa did.
Yes.
So thank you to Teresa. So to support an informational public meeting in advance of the Prop 218 approval meeting on December 7th. This would likely be the week after Thanksgiving, week of 11/27. I know you guys have already thought through this quite a bit. Along with that, there would be a press release announcing the rate increase, promotion in advance of the meeting, of course, and then the things we know we do: website updates, email newsletter articles, and social media. And so those are just kind of those fundamental things we do for large projects like this.
Will we, I think that we certainly can afford to boost and do paid social media. Will that be?
Yes, we
Great.
can do that. We can talk about other ways to let people know about the meeting. There are, you know, we don't need to get in the weeds here today, but things like community calendars, flyers on community bulletin boards, that kind of thing. We know that, you know, that person-to-person engagement is a really great way to let people know about this. So.
One thing that we don't have on here that is a budget related thing is we don't have any advertising outside of the boosted social posts. For example, there isn't anything in here about a half-page ad in the press banner or the post. Those are things that we could do if there was funding available to do that.
So you're saying that you don't know about the budget for that?
We know what those things cost, but
Right,
we would
but you
need
don't
to
know
know if
what
there's a budget available.
Staff
There
needs
is,
to
right.
indicate. I would encourage that.
Yes.
And then the
definitely.
decision if you want to promote that first meeting or if you want to promote the second open house meeting, if there would be one, but I'm just getting a little ahead of myself.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Can I add one more thing? And this following on where I believe Jamie's coming from, just because I do think it's helpful to be a little more specific here. So you're talking about ways to get people's attention. And my question is, what would be the most effective? Like, I would imagine it would be sending a mailing to every ratepayer that says, your new rates are likely to be the following.
Right. So
I mean,
that's
it's
actually,
not to just say there's going to be a rate discussion.
yeah.
Yeah.
So that's the thing that we kind of get into a, chicken or egg, which comes first. So there's a desire to do an informational meeting in advance of the board approving the rates and starting the Prop 218 process. And then once that starts, we work on the Prop 218 mailer, which historically has been a multi-page, almost like booklet or pamphlet that goes out. It usually includes the new rates in a chart. FAQ has been included in the past. It includes the actual protest form. So we make it super easy. That was a recommendation from legal a couple years ago for people if they want to fill out the form. And that goes to every customer. But that happens after the board meeting.
That's what I'm questioning, and I don't have your experience, but I'd like to know what will be the value of having a meeting before December 7th if it doesn't have the information that would galvanize people after December 7th?
Well, we have that information. What we're saying is we're considering these rates as opposed to
Right.
the board has adopted a Prop 218 process that includes these rates,
So I'm
right? So
asking
there's
if
a,
we'll say that we're
Yeah.
considering these specific rates.
right.
Yeah, we have to give them the real information, the information, because otherwise it's just more, we're about to, we're going to, and then people glaze over on that.
Right, but to your question, I think the mailer goes out after. we take
Legally,
the
I think
vote.
it goes out after the board approves.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what
And
we
it
would
is
be-
required.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
But so what we would be talking about in advance of that meeting would be some advertising that includes, here are the rates that the board has been presented.
Uh-huh.
Your opportunity to ask questions and give feedback is this date. The board will vote on the Prop 218 process on December 7th. That would be my approach.
So let me understand, the meeting that we're talking about the week of the 27th is not a board meeting.
Right.
Okay,
No.
this is a virtual meeting that will,
Ref Telus.
yeah, and Raftellus and you and
I'm not
And
even sure I
maybe-
want Ref Telus.
Right.
Well, somebody needs to present the rates.
Well, I understand that, but they are way down in the weeds of spreadsheets and things like that, and I'm, we've seen several of their presentations, and you walk away kind of glazed after a while, because
So I spoke with Teresa this morning or emailed with her and she said it was not a Raptellus meeting, that it would
Okay,
be a
good.
district or us meeting.
Yeah. we want to focus more on, here's what has happened that has raised our cost of providing service, and here's how this will affect you in the rates of what we're going to do with the money.
So we would recommend this be an in-person open house style meeting. And you could host it like here. We set up several display boards explaining the rates, explaining what the rates pay for, kind of the purpose and need. You could even explain what past rates are currently paying for, like all the great CIP work you're doing now.
Yeah.
And then you have district staff and or board members stationed at those display boards for people to come and ask questions. This is not doing a presentation because when you do a presentation, then you provide an opportunity for people to take the microphone, ask questions, derail the conversation, or just, say things you don't want said to the whole group.
Or
And-
tune out.
Right.
so
And-
are all the board members present? Can they be present? No,
We should not be present.
no board members.
We should, I mean, I would. If I was doing this in my professional life, we would not have the board members there. The staff would be responsible for collecting this feedback and then reporting back to the board. What the context of the meeting was and how that went, how many attendees there were, the kinds of questions that got asked, that sort of thing. But that being said, at last night's meeting, there was a concern raised about COVID being significantly on the rise and having an in-person meeting perhaps being not, the best idea right now. So that is a wrinkle that some board members were concerned about.
We're not public health experts, so I'm not gonna comment on what should or shouldn't happen in that
Understand.
situation.
Do you have any experience with turnout comparing a live meeting such as you're envisioning to a virtual meeting?
They've been in very different situations because we haven't had a lot of in-person opportunities like this since before COVID. I think some of the rate study meetings and Prop 218 meetings you guys had in like 2014 and 2017 were very well attended.
Right.
There were a lot of things happening at that time that drew people. It wasn't
We
just
haven't
about,
had those kind of
it wasn't
meetings
just
in a
about the
while.
rates. We've done some virtual meetings where we try to facilitate, not specifically Prop 218, where we try to facilitate some sort of conversation about a coming project. And I would say that's 20 to 40 people.
It's just really, it's hard to answer the question. There's a lot of apples and oranges issues there.
Well, and I guess it's also kind of a question to staff. Have you all received many comments, emails, calls, whatever from our community saying, hey, why do we not have this online? But that being said, most of the meetings are online, right?
Yeah.
If not all of them.
We tend to have, with the exception of the last couple of meetings, we tend to have more online attendees than we do in-person attendees. Even last night,
But
there
only
were
a
3,
handful more.
right, a handful more, but I mean, there were 3 people here in person and, we had like a dozen people online at one point, in terms of attendees. So, people to me are expressing their preference to call in, not show up in that regard. Go ahead. Why don't we keep interrupting you?
No, this
This is how it should be.
it's collaborative.
Absolutely.
So regardless of how that meeting occurs, we would support that. And then we do the Prop 218 mailer with the aim to get that out on the 29th of December. We're working with those logistics through holiday season and printers, and the mail is still operating, but we'll want to get that done early. There are other outreach materials that will be developed. We talked about an FAQ, maybe a project fact sheet or a Prop 218 fact sheet that's 1 page, display boards or graphics, and that would be, if we do an in-person community meeting, those would be printed and displayed. Otherwise, they could be on the website. There's some sort of, I'm sure we could come up with some sort of online presentation, or just, there would be a webpage about this. So some way to convey those to folks who don't come to a meeting. And then support ongoing outreach efforts throughout that Prop 218 period, including any media coordination needed, website updates, continued email newsletter articles, and social media. Now, in the before times when we helped with Prop 218 processes here, that community open house occurred within the Prop 218 window. So once people received the mailer at home and reviewed it, then they had questions. And they had some time to sit down with it, look at their rates or look at the FAQs, and then they wanted to come and talk to staff with their concerns. So we did propose a meeting in January or maybe early February now with the shift in timeline to address those community concerns. It's outside of a board meeting.
What if instead of doing a community meeting before the Prop 218 process, we spent this time and money on some real advertising and outreach to let people know that December 7th will be the date that we are going to take up the Prop 218 vote. We can include in that kind of marketing and advertising what the proposed rates would look like, so that there's no question that people have heard that that is going to happen at that meeting, and we don't hear later, well, you didn't tell anyone it was over the holidays, which I know I keep hearing from one board member. And didn't make the attempt at holding a pre-December 7th community meeting.
I actually like that. We haven't had great success at getting large numbers of people at community meetings. If there's COVID concerns accelerating, that gets worse. We can put something in almost everybody's hand through the mail, or we can talk to 25 people here. And I think to me, the meeting's almost an afterthought. We could still have a meeting, but I would put most of the time and effort into the reaching everyone with some sort of a promotion, a mailing or an ad, or something like that. that have wider reach.
And we would never be able to do that before the November 16th date that we'd originally talked about. So this would actually give us a window to create something and then put some money into pushing it out there so that people are aware of the December 7th.
When does your next bill insert go out?
That's what I was just gonna say. That would probably be the best way is to do a bill insert. And there's 2 different cycles, so we'll have to figure out how we can align that, but it's probably doable. If we can get our ducks in a row and
I
get
think
some
we
kind of
can.
informational
Yeah.
sheet. Okay, yeah,
Yeah,
and I'll figure out those billing dates.
And then you're not adding a cost also. It's something you already do.
Right. And,
Sorry.
you know, the money that we would, I mean, we'll spend less money, but the money that we would spend on developing the materials for the outreach meeting and all that, we can plow that into marketing and advertising dollars.
There's also a significant amount of staff time, both ours and the district, that goes into planning, supporting, and executing a community meeting. So some
to be clear,
of
we're
that
not
could
talking
go.
about mixing it all together, right?
No,
This
we
is,
would
okay,
still
but
be
the one
doing
before,
Open house.
right?
Post
Yeah.
December 7th, so,
Yeah.
you know, so the January, February timeframe, but we would not try to do one beforehand. Instead, we would use this month to make sure that people are really aware and cover our bases there, because there's, you know, there's the secondary complaint that we often hear from one board member is, well, this is happening over the holidays. It happens over the holidays every time, but whatever. It's happening over the holidays, so it's not transparent to the public that we're doing this. But if we can show, look at all of the touch points that, you know, in this last month that we made to try and reach people and let them know this was happening in spite of the holidays. You know, we've done our due diligence.
Right, and I think that having, I mean, to the point of it being over the holidays, not having a community meeting ahead of December 7th is actually better, because that way you're gonna reach people in any and every other way. It's also a very short turnaround time from now until a meeting, and so talk about getting all those materials out right now, like, you're not giving people much advance notice that, oh, there's a meeting that you want me to go to. So people could get pissed off about not
Right.
having enough time to plan to go to that meeting, and so having the meeting later on, give them all the information. December 7th is when we're gonna be
First.
voting on it.
Yeah. It also gives us some time to sort out what that format of a January or
Yeah.
February meeting will be. We can have a better grip on what health concerns are. Sorry,
Okay,
Mark.
I'm on the same page as everyone who's spoken. But if I can just go past that a little bit, I have a detailed question about the FAQ. Who is actually going to prepare that?
We will start it and we'll work with staff to answer the questions. But of course, if anyone has a question that would like to contribute,
I think it's really gonna be important. You made this point last night and I thought that it was excellent. That, you know, Raftellus talks about the rates in this very complex way. You know, people don't understand what things like, okay, you know, this capital charge, like, I would completely agree. If I just saw that on paper, I'd be like, what are you building? And of course, that's not quite the context that the capital charge exists in. So really making it just very straightforward for people. Here's what your bill would look like. It'll be this much of an increase for the amount of water that you purchase and consume, or decrease in some cases. This much of an increase for your fixed charge. What does your fixed charge mean? It means everything that we have to pay to get water to you, regardless of how much water you use.
Right.
Right? I mean, so really breaking that down for people, I think would be awesome.
Yeah, I'll just, I agree with you. I'll add one thing. Yeah, I'd feel best if I had some way to assess how effective that FAQ is going to be, and because the FAQ that's online right now doesn't meet my expectations.
No.
And,
ours either. So,
But there are other FAQs out there for other districts that come closer.
Yeah.
And they could be, references.
SoCal has a really nice rate study page, like with links to all of their different sort of
Oh, good. I'll check that.
explanations about different things.
even the one from 2017 from this district was really helpful because it deals with some of those bigger picture things, but also nuanced things. At the time, there were questions about like Lone Pico. And so whatever niggling things are out there, the wastewater or Big Basin, like questions people might ask, and that way they can be answered when they receive it at home.
And just like basic things, like we know that everybody doesn't pay the wastewater, that that's a very finite number of customers, but reminding people like, this only affects these 54 customers, so you, you know, most of you are not paying for that. Right.
So,
And just that one thing, that, if you were open to it, and if the committee was open to it, I would propose that the committee could contribute questions and answers that you can do as you see fit with.
That would,
Yeah.
It's just material that you can take and throw away or use.
Would there be any Brown Act reason?
I'm sorry.
Would there be any Brown Act issues with that if we, as a committee, you know, gave feedback? Because we won't have another meeting
do it
before
individually.
December.
we can do it individually, each one of
Yeah.
us.
Yeah, no, there's no Brown Act problem, as long as we don't share it with the whole group.
Okay.
So,
okay, so I think you all know how to reach me, or you can get my information from Holly or
Or you
Carly.
can contact me and I can get it
Yeah.
to Miller Maxfield.
And that's a great point, Mark, actually, that if there's information you want included in the FAQ, but you don't, maybe you don't know what the question is, like, let us know what you want included. We'll figure out how to frame it up. But we like to think of this as, like, think of every, like, random question that you would be asked by a reporter or by your mom, or what weird question is gonna come up. Let's think of all of them and we'll answer them.
But at the same time, you don't want every random weird question that you're gonna come up with. That's why it's frequently asked
Well,
questions.
we
'cause
want
you
to know-
The most important
sort.
ones are.
Also, a good point. We want to know all those questions. We want to
Got it.
have answers that we're prepared with, and then we'll pick those top level ones to actually publish. But that way staff knows the questions that might be asked and the hard answers.
Totally, internal FAQ. and
Exactly.
external, yes.
Exactly.
And you'll use your judgment on that, but
Yeah.
I am indeed thinking that some of the frequently asked questions, I think, will be hostile ones.
Yeah.
And it would be good to have answers ready for those.
Definitely.
And part of that process is when you do have those hostile ones, we're not gonna actually ask the question in a hostile way.
Oh, we
We'll
should
need
have the
to,
answer.
we'll need to frame them in a respectful way, but then get at the answer that they're looking to get,
Right.
right?
So,
There's an art to this.
so another thought here, just
Please go ahead.
in looking at questions and answers and things, when we talk about cost increases that we've had, we should talk about that at the district level. When we talk about price increases, we talk about that at the end, what the individual is gonna have to pay. We don't want anything here that gives them the ability to try and figure out, well, if this doesn't, my share should be.
Mhm.
And that's one of the reasons why I don't want, Raftellus' slides in this, because we've spent numerous hours, digging through there and saying, well, this cost can't possibly write in that one, and,
well,
so.
that happened last night. That
Yeah.
fella that was here thought he was gonna get a 45% increase
Right.
Yeah.
on his bill. And that was just that they had changed the amount of fixed to 45% for the whole district. And he thought he was gonna have to pay 45% more. I wanted to tell him, no, that's not what
Right.
that is.
So
Yeah.
talk about our cost increases at the district level. We've had to spend $8 million on this, and we've had to spend, and our electricity rates from PG&E have gone up 30% and all of that.
Yeah.
And then talk about your water rate is gonna go from $12 a month to $18 a month or whatever it is, but we don't want
Yeah.
anything in these materials that gives them the ability to sit there and start trying to calculate.
So, did you have more slides? Since we've-
I have a really pretty slide at the end if you want to look at an
Yeah.
aerial view of
Pretty slide.
Blue Ridge Tank.
I think that just, I wanna, we have some other things on the agenda, so I wanna sort of encapsulate this conversation. I think we're all on the same page. What we will be recommending to the full board is a public outreach process that kicks off. And it's gonna depend on how quickly we can get materials together.
Mhm.
But my preference would be prior to Thanksgiving, that we begin, with the
Mhm.
social media posts and marketing content. That will include some paid advertising and potentially something in the bill insert if we can align that process. In advance of the Prop 218 decision at the December 7th meeting. And maybe it would be possible for Miller Maxfield to document that so that we can report that out to the board at the November 16th meeting. in terms of encapsulating what we plan to do over the next 5 weeks.
And this is a technical logistic question, I guess. Does the board need to approve the outreach plan, communications plan, or we're just telling them this is what we're gonna do?
I believe that we can just provide an
Okay.
informational item to the full board about what is planned for
Yeah,
outreach.
Cause that'll
without
help with
asking.
like getting the materials ready in place. Like you're not just creating the plan, you're also creating the materials as well in the
Correct.
meantime.
I think they have to approve a budget if there's
Right.
going to be additional budget, because right now we're month to month with you, aren't we?
We are not in contract right now.
Right, not in contract right now.
Okay.
So
So a budget would make sense, yeah.
Yeah, so we would need from you, the staff time costs plus advertising, plus if we need to print.
As
the
long as
bill
it's
and
under
stuff.
30,000, we can move forward with the purchasing
Yeah.
policy as well, which I'm assuming
be.
it will
Yeah.
be, but
Mhm.
I mean, as far as the timing, it probably makes more sense for us to move ahead
Yes,
than to bring it to the board and then try to squeeze it in within a week or two.
yes,
So-
if we have the
So-
30,000 available to us now, I don't want to take it to the board and ask for budget, because I
Yeah.
think that that'll be more than enough.
Got
So we'll do that as an informational item at the November 16th meeting.
Perfect.
And so I am gonna move that we recommend an outreach plan as defined by Miller Maxfield to be presented to the full board at the November 16th meeting. Do I have a second?
okay. Jamie Ackman,
Yes?
Jeff Hill,
Yes,
Amanda De Jesus,
Yes.
Mark Dolson.
Yes,
Awesome. Thank you so much. This was so helpful in thinking through like what was possible and made sense. I really appreciate your time.
These are always complex, aren't they?
Yeah.
Oh, there's my picture.
Oh, there's the-
It's the new Blue Ridge.
When do I get one? Where is that? Where's Blue Ridge?
It's on 230, it's off of,
Oh,
sorry,
okay.
it's off of Highway 9 off Blue Ridge Drive. It's kind of up towards, where the, it's no longer Cafe 9, what's the, it's not Burger 9 anymore, Sawmill.
Oh,
yeah.
okay.
Sawmill,
Yeah, it's right past Sawmill.
So
Yeah.
Got
it's
it.
green,
Okay.
but it's called Blue Ridge Tank.
It was a redwood tank, so.
Wasn't there another tank or project that you guys had that was called a color, but
Yeah,
the tank was not that color?
The tank at Monona Woods was
Yeah.
called Blue Tank.
Blue
Yes,
And the new one is Tan, but it's still
Right.
called Blue Tank.
exactly.
Yeah.
It's a tradition now. so.
yeah, it is.
Thank you.
I
Okay,
have
thank
just a
you.
quick question for Carly.
Sure.
Rick is retired. I don't think Ryan Frost starts for like another 10 days or something like that.
Mhm.
Are you signature authority now?
Yes, yeah, I'm acting in between.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
I just
Yeah.
didn't know that had been
Yeah.
settled or not.
Carly,
Yes.
we have a press release to distribute.
Can we hang
Okay.
out for a
Wonder if
minute?
we'll
Of
just
course.
Use
sit
your
over here
Wi-Fi?
quietly?
Please do. There's also another room back there. You're welcome to. go
I'll move
into.
over there. So I'm not
Okay.
here with-
It's for us. I'll be-
Yes, it is an O'Brien.
Yes, thank you for your help on that.
Thank you.
I was checking my notes, and I was remembering of one detail that, I don't know who's updating the rate study webpage, but it would be good to update it.
We need to.
We can work
So
on
we
that,
figure out
yeah.
what to actually say in this little interim phase.
Perfect.
Okay.
Thank you. Okay, moving on to new business. I wonder if, with the forbearance of the committee, we could take these items out of order and start with the Brown Act procedures instead, because I think the board policy manual will be an ongoing discussion. We're not gonna wrap that up today. So I have presented a memo. If, for background, there have been some questions raised at board meetings over the last couple of months about procedural items and what is appropriate in terms of audience participation, as well as how board staff should engage with the board and the audience during those meetings. And I thought it would be good to have this conversation here. And then if we're in agreement, recommend to the board as an informational item that the administrative committee has reviewed these procedures, and based on feedback from our general counsel, we believe that these are the appropriate ways to handle these kinds of incidents. So
We might even want to modify somewhat the language on the standard board minute or board agendas to include a short mention.
Yes, yeah. So item one was the public comment sign-in process. It had been just sort of a more informal policy that we, asked people if they wanted to give their name and address of residence. Some people are really happy to do that, as we, saw last night. And some people are more reticent. And there was a bit of a conflagration at one board meeting about whether it was appropriate to do that. And so we reached out to General Counsel for advice. General Counsel said that the Brown Act and Robert's Rules of Order are silent on whether you can ask. You can't require it for meeting participation, but you can ask. And if someone chooses not to, that's up to them. So I had an opportunity to talk about this with Holly. She suggested that as a sort of non-disruptive way of handling that we would have that language on the in the agenda packet, and then also she could put a sign on the podium asking people if they, could give their name and count of residence before they speak, and letting them know that it is not required for them to do so. Just in terms of fairness, most people online, you already have their name because they've registered, online virtually with their name. So it's not like we're asking for people for things that are not sort of already being offered to us here in this room. I think that it's helpful to staff to have that information for meeting minutes to clarify who said what when certain comments come up. So that would be my suggestion. And I'm open to feedback from the committee or thoughts or questions. Amanda.
I think that's a great idea. It can also help with meeting organization too. So for example, when people come in person and want to comment, and when there's people online who want to comment, you come in and you submit a comment card, say, hey, here's my name. And then that way you have an order so you can call people. So there's a line. So you have Jamie's first and then Amanda and so on and so on. And you can switch between as they come in online and as they come in person. It's basically like a sign-in saying that you want to say something.
You also
rather
know
than it
what
just
they want to
being-
comment on.
Right. If it's in general comment, then you have no idea. But yes, then that way also they can sign up for a specific item too. So I think that's a great idea. I absolutely think that we should do that. I think it's nice to have the town, but I think name is
Yeah, none of it's required.
right.
Scott, did you have-
In the past, years ago, we did have comment cards when things were kind of contentious back in the day, and we were having meetings back in that other room. And it seemed to want to work, but it just kind of got just jumbled up, and
people start filling out their like.
Yeah, it didn't really pan out. I mean, we tried it. I mean, that was one, because it was people, it was like if it was rate study or during the campus thing or whatever, but there was some chaos involved in it, and we went away from it.
I mean, it would require someone to manage it. So it's like whoever's sitting at that end right there, it's probably Holly. They would come up to that podium or wherever they have like a little place, all they need is your name. And then as it comes in on a Word doc, Holly puts their name in. So that way, when it's their time to speak, that's shared on the screen. You can see, okay, I'm number 3 in the list, and you can see the list of people the whole time, and it's being added to constantly as people online. So it does take a little bit of management during the meeting.
Well, and maybe you say have Holly do it, because she's taking
No.
notes. And stuff like that, and she's
Someone.
not sharing her
I'm
screen,
not
so
saying it should
I'm
be
saying
her.
there's-
I think that I know exactly what you're talking about, because in a larger city
Yeah.
council meeting, that's how they manage the comments. I'm familiar with that. I think that we're trying to reduce the overall management burden, but also encourage people to give that information if they're willing to. And so Holly had suggested that this might be like a lower entry bar if we put it on the podium and just ask them when they get up to give that information rather than filling out a sign-in card. I think that for meetings that we know are going to be contentious or heavily attended, it would be nice, especially because sometimes the meetings get a little out of control. But I think for our purposes of recommendation, I would suggest we start with this, podium sign and see if that helps, since it's only a few people who are commenting anyway, and it's not like we're having dozens of people typically.
Half the time we know who they are.
Yeah, well, they've already
But I-
stood up 5 times.
This is their eighth.
Okay, Eric, what else do you have to say?
And once it's somebody does it in front of them, then they see, oh, that's how you're supposed to do it. So. and that
Thank you,
helps.
Bruce.
I think that, the one thing that we should include is also asking, having the board chair or whoever's managing the meeting, if it's the vice chair, say like, we encourage you to offer your name and town of residence when the public comment period starts as a reminder, and then, go from there. So that was one of the items that we wanted to address, and then the second item was whether or not the public has the right to offer points of order. And this was one that stuck in my public agency craw. The meeting is run by the elected officials in the room. The meeting is not run by the audience. And so one audience member felt that he interjected a point of order, and then when he was told that that was inappropriate, he stood up and gave public comment about why we were wrong. And so I do think that it's really important, because there seemed to be a lack of clarity on the dais amongst some board members about whether or not we should be allowing the public to interject points of order in terms of how we run the meeting. We reached out to general counsel, and again, she said absolutely not. There is nothing that, would allow the audience to interject points of order in the procedural operation of a meeting. And I am, I think a little more harsh than Mark in the sense that I would limit public comment to, you've made your public comment, unless it is appropriate for you to stand up and give another public comment, you are not invited to speak. You are an audience in this meeting. Because there's a lot of back and forth discussion that tends to happen. I can't imagine what that's like to listen to online.
Well, it's confusing, but I completely agree. I mean, I think some people are confused about the role of the public, and it is to observe and offer selective input. It's not to inject themselves into the flow of the meeting with point of order comments, nor is it the role of the board members to talk to the public. So,
Holly and then Amanda.
Well, and then also what he was complaining about was me supposedly interrupting the meeting to ask a question or to prompt the chair to ask something that was going on. And what it comes down to is that's part of my job, is to keep the meeting going. And that's how I have to do it, is by, excuse me, you forgot to talk to the public or something like that. So
Your title is board secretary because you are part of the board during the meeting, and you are part of the operations of the meeting.
yeah.
And
So that was very disconcerting that he was all up in arms because I was being part of the meeting, and that's
right,
part of my job.
right.
Yes.
That's why you sit up here and he sits out there.
Right.
So, I would recommend that, in terms of how we could communicate this, we might, in the language in the agenda where we reference public comments, say something along these lines here, that the public comment is limited to the designated times afforded to them under the public comment procedure, and it is not the role of the public to interject points of order into the flow of the meeting.
The other thing is it says in the board policy that you get one chance to speak. And we often have let them go on and come back and say something again and that sort of thing. And that's really not supposed to happen either. I'm not saying it a different subject, but I'm just saying the back and forth.
Yeah, no,
They're supposed to get there. Then if the next thing comes along, they can speak again. You know, it's not like
but
you get
only on that one
chance.
topic though. You can't
Yeah,
go back to a
on that
different
one. Yeah,
topic
you
on the
can't keep-
agenda.
yeah.
Right, and if you do, you can and should be cut off by the board, whoever's managing the
So this is
meeting.
Something that the guy with the gavel. needs
Right,
to-
where's the police department?
Yeah, yeah. Yeah,
I
maybe
only
we
ever
need to
saw
bring that
Margaret
gavel
Bruce
back.
use it. She used it.
I think
Right
that
on top of
that
his
is
forehead.
absolutely true. The public comment period is, you know, is you are given an opportunity to comment on the item. And then the public comment period typically in most public meetings is closed and you return back to board discussion, and there is not an opportunity for people to get up and then, you know, have a debate about what they've heard the board say in response to their comment. So that's a meeting operation thing that we can talk to somebody about. Yes.
So maybe, I don't mean, I have no idea who this person is or what they were going on about. I obviously did not watch that meeting,
You
unfortunately.
still can.
I know, I'm going to. Maybe that necessitates just a blanket, this is how local government works. This is how a water district works. This is how a board meeting works type of, I don't know, some sort of communication out to the community, not targeting that person, obviously, but just a general, like, in case because we're gonna start doing all this outreach with the Prop 218 and with the rate study, it might help to just, here's how you attend a meeting, here's what you do, here's what the board does, and here's how you can participate.
Have to be
I
real careful
did a-
on that.
Absolutely,
Extremely.
absolutely.
I did a flyer on that one time, and it was a threefold thing that we kept at the table, and you could go in and read it, and it laid out what you do when you want to speak, and this
Mhm.
is how you sit through a meeting. I can read.
I would love to
I
see
could
that.
bring it
Yeah.
up.
Why don't we take a look at that? That might be.
I
really
mean,
helpful.
because you can do it in a fun way, like in the newsletter, like each week have one piece, one little tidbit in the newsletter that talks about
Mhm.
how government works, essentially.
Yeah.
Don't have to be specific, like, don't stand up in the middle of the meeting and start arguing with people, please. Like, obviously not that, but just regular procedures of a meeting.
I think that it also would be helpful. I mean, we tell the board members and incoming board chair to like read Robert's Rules of Order. But if you're not someone who's ever run a public meeting before, internalizing what that should look like and how that should function is a little bit more challenging. And so I think that for future discussion, we might want to look at like something that's a little bit of a training for the incoming chair. So, but
We could also retain a sergeant at arms and give him a big cork.
hey, you know what? I mean, I have been in meetings where we have had people locked out and you know, we had law enforcement in every single.
We've
meeting
had
for
law
contract.
enforcement at our meetings in the past.
Yeah, so, you know, not that I think we need that here, but.
No, I was being facetious.
So I would like to recommend that we move these informational items forward to the full board to clarify meeting procedures going forward. And do I have a second?
Second.
Oops.
This is no motion.
You're right, no motion is actually required, but I like to ask people. if
This is just for consensus.
All I'm trying to
favor,
embrace
say
the
aye.
democratic process.
I agree.
Yeah, so we all agree. Okay, the last item on the agenda, and as I said, we've only got 10 minutes left, is to begin a review of the board policy manual. For background, and I'm sure you're all aware, we had some pretty challenging conversations with one board member due to some behavior that they were demonstrating towards staff that had created significant problems for the district. We lost our director of finance and our general manager retired early as a result. So one of the recommendations that came out of that meeting discussion was that we look at the board policy manual to see if we can strengthen the language in it around how we expect board members to engage with staff. And one suggestion that came to me outside of the meeting was that several years ago, our former general counsel to the district submitted a memo about a respectful workplace policy.
Mm.
And that we may want to consider adding that language to the board policy manual.
Mhm.
So what I would like to start by doing is recommending that we share that memo with the full administrative committee.
It's online, sure.
Is it online? Okay,
And
I think so,
it is.
yeah.
And that we
But I-
consider adding that language into the section on board member interactions with staff that I believe begins on page 2 of the board policy manual. The other question, so that was one recommendation. The second question was around hybrid remote meeting policy for committee member attendance and whether we needed to clarify that language in the board policy manual. And Mark had asked me to have a discussion about that, but I don't know exactly what the issue was that has come up. So is there a specific issue around
Well, actually, it was that there was a meeting that Gail attended that did not put her address and all of that sort of thing. But it was a special situation because she was ill and she was convalescing, and it was with cause, I believe is what it was caused,
Yeah.
what it's called. And so somebody took issue with it, but then somebody used that very same item last night for a meeting.
Oh, interesting.
So I think that's probably a moot point now.
Okay, interesting. So I guess what I would say is that we have the board policy manual from 2022. What I'd like to ask the committee to do is take a look at it, in particular with respect to the respectful workplace policy, but also around whether there are any other issues that you think are that we're silent on in that policy that need to be addressed. And then if we could bring those recommendations back to the December meeting, with the goal of trying to have a formal edit to the board policy manual to take forward to the full board in January.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that makes sense.
my only thought would be that it might be helpful to give us, a deadline like a week ahead of that to share those by email so that people have time to review and
That's a
consider.
good idea. So let's see here.
Okay, I'm
Are we allowed to do that?
having a problem because I am going to have to post the meeting agenda on the 22nd. I can't quite see it
Before
from
the
here.
Thanksgiving
Of
holiday.
November, because I am off from the 23rd till the 30th. I'm coming back from Hawaii to be at this meeting. So
So could we, I don't know that I don't know if this is a legal question, but what I was thinking was that we would just have the item on the agenda and then committee members would bring those changes here for discussion. We could send them to you even though you're not physically there, and then when you return from vacation, you could send them as a do not reply all email to the full committee so that we have time to look at them beforehand. But I don't think we actually have to keep them in the or post them in the agenda. We just have to indicate in the agenda that we're going to have a discussion about it.
okay, well, it would be that morning of the meeting that I would do it because I'm coming back on the 30th or
Could
the
we-
1st.
Carly, if we sent them to you, are you around and could you just?
Yeah, that should be fine.
Yeah.
I'm planning to be here.
Why don't we do
I'll
that?
make sure you have everybody's emails.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sounds good.
So then why don't we give well, if it's possible, could we take a look and have some initial comments by the week of Thanksgiving, like the 20th or 22nd? That still gives us, 3 weeks or.
Mhm.
Yeah.
2 weeks. So let's set the deadline then, of Monday, the 22nd, if possible, to have your
What
recommended
month are you looking at?
the November.
The
Yeah.
20th?
Yeah.
That's
Oh, I'm
Monday
sorry,
the
Monday the
20th.
20th.
Like, wait,
Blah. I'm looking at saying Wednesday,
Yeah.
looking at Monday. Monday, the 20th, to have any initial thoughts on board policy manual updates to Holly. That would be great. And I think the other question to consider is the board policy manual is somewhat silent on the issue of censure. And I think that we need to be more specific, and I will reach out to general counsel and ask them to provide us with language around, you know, what is appropriate for censure of a board member and how you would go about censuring a board member if you found that you had a reason to. There was a lot of discussion about that at a board meeting recently, but I felt like the board was tenuous about doing something along those lines because they didn't really understand what their rights were.
Now, we have censured a board member in my tenure here.
Wasn't that the one that really did something bad though? Like he was doing the legal, he owned the property or something, or am I?
No, no,
Oh.
this was something else. No, that was all,
That was felt.
that was all done with we had bad legal advice.
Okay.
That he did not do anything bad at all. He was told he was given the wrong information. No, this was a board member that was sharing closed session information and, gosh, what else was he doing? Do you remember, Carly?
I don't, I'm sorry.
Yeah, oh, writing things in the paper that
Oh.
was not, true and, just he was
So this
was
wasn't
talking way
this
too
wasn't
much.
Bob? That wasn't Bob.
No.
Okay. Well, that's good to know.
And I can
so-
look up, I can go back and see what I can find on that whole situation and see how that came about. It may, because I don't remember very much about it, it may have been in closed session that they did most of it and then just announced.
Okay.
And he was taken off all committees and.
Well, I think that we should at least have some discussion in the board policy manual about what is the censure, how do you, apply that appropriately? Because I felt like the conversation that we were having as a board was very unfinished because the board didn't know, it's like, we want to say that you're doing something bad, but we don't really know how to do it. And I thought that would be helpful.
Yes. Yes.
Okay. So,
Is that with the thought of actually doing something about him or no?
if
Does that
that's,
ship sail?
I don't know. If it, my issue is, and I'll be honest, I have seen lots of poorly behaved elected officials, and he is certainly one of them. But unless I can see like what is the specific harassment, is it 15 emails a day to the same staff person? Is it specific aggressive language? There's a nuance to that. Like, it's one thing to be like, look, he's a jerk in the way that he talks to people. And that sucks, but unfortunately, there's like a limit to what you can do about that, unless he's a jerk in the way that he talks to people, and it is so aggressive that it's impossible for people to do their work. And
Well,
think
causing people illness and that's.
yeah, I mean, those are really significant concerns, but I'll be honest, I think that some of that was the general manager failing to require the director to follow the board policy manual in the way that he engaged on questions. We, as the other board members, have less ability to control that. The board policy manual specifically states that board members are supposed to go through the general manager for all things. And if I were the general manager, I would have said, don't respond to him, block his email address. He comes to me and me only. I'm not sure that was happening.
I think we tried that and it, after time, He slid back into his old ways.
Yeah, well, I mean, I would actually block his email address from anybody else. Like, there's one email you can send to.
Well, just because we're having this discussion, I'll add one thing. I understand the concerns you have. I think there's a separate issue that should be addressed in some way, which is when you have violated the policies and procedures and you're absolutely hostile to any consideration of that, then you've put yourself in a position where all the people can do is censure you and say, okay, you're not playing along. It doesn't matter what else you've done. We're just saying you're not cooperating.
Mark, if we were having this conversation at the board meeting where we addressed it, I would have happily voted for censure, me personally. But that wasn't being placed on the table.
Right.
And my concern is that now, if you go back months later and try, you know, like, I don't know, if, I'm not sure how that comes across. It's a conversation that I think that we have to have as a board, and the way that we can have it is by saying, we've looked at the board policy manual. We are recommending that we strengthen it in these ways. And we could potentially, as a committee, say, and we are recommending that for these kinds of actions, a board member be censured. I think that we would need legal to weigh in on making sure that we stay, you know, that we're coloring in the right lines. But we could, as a committee, make that recommendation.
So, like, comment, speaking as a board member, I would have voted for censure in that situation if I had a clear understanding of what the consequences were of that and what, you know, what the criteria and consequences were, but I didn't know exactly what I would be voting for, and so I was not willing to, you know, entertain that. But if I'd had a better understanding of it, I probably would have voted for it.
Right. So, points well taken. I don't think that I'm not at all trying to dismiss the concerns of staff, because I completely understand what they are. I'm just wanting to make sure that that whatever steps we take are executed not in a spiteful way, but in a, like, look, we've reviewed the policy. You know, this behavior clearly falls within the lines of, you know, behavior that should be considered for censure. You know, we're recommending back to the board now that they take another look at this issue. I think that that's what the board was hoping they would get out of this board policy manual review. Okay.
Good information.
So, all right, that brings us to the end of this very exciting administrative committee meeting. So thanks for staying a little long. Appreciate the conversation.
Yeah, thank you.
I'm gonna jump into my meeting, so if you'll